Sup nerds, I'm Wes, and today I'm exploring all of the natural beauty the US of A has to offer in trekking the national parks. Trekking the national parks is a family weight game where you are each explorers and you're visiting different national parks and you're racing to get to certain parks. So you've got your parks dealt out here that everyone's racing to go to, and the first person there can spend a sequence of cards to then claim that card. That they get to keep that card for victory points. Then the next card is dealt out, and you continue going on to a certain point in the game. You also have the major parks like the Grand Canyon and the Everglades and those really famous US parks that give you bonus abilities during the game. It's not like an extra action you can take, but it's like a static ability where you can, use two cards as any card when you're claiming one of these parks, or you can move extra. And while they don't give you as many points as the other parks, they do give you those abilities that make it easier for you to score these parks. You gotta have to weigh, like, which extra actions do you want? When is it convenient to get them? Is it worth going out of your way to get those when you could get these bigger scoring parks? All of that kind of fun stuff. And the regular parks, again, when you claim them, you get to keep that card to show you have those victory points, whereas the major parks, you claim them with your TP, and that way everybody can have access to those abilities. You're not like stealing it out from under somebody else, because that probably wouldn't be very fair. In addition to visiting national parks, you are trying to collect these cool little plastic gemstones that are on the board, and whoever has the majority of those gets bonus points for having majority. So it's a little bit of a race to see, like, who can get the most blacks, who can get the most reds. Is it worth it for me to go there because I'm going to get the blue, or maybe it's worth it for me to take a detour on my way across the board to collect a few of those gems to get these points as well. When I was first reading the rulebook for this game, I was kind of hoping that this would replace Ticket to Ride in my collection, because I'm not a huge fan of the game. I know, don't crucify me down there, but it's just not my cup of tea, and I'm happy to play it. I enjoy it. I don't know if I've just played it too much or if it was overhyped, but it's just not something I'm going to grab. So I thought, well, this is going to be kind of similar because of the way that you score these parks. So you have these cards out here, and there's face-up cards, and then there's a deck of cards. You can take one of the face-up cards or one from the deck, and you have to collect a sequence of colors of those cards to claim the park. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of like collecting like a set of similar color cards in Ticket to Ride, and then playing that set to lay your track down, and you have to connect certain spots. So I'm like, that's kind of similar. That is kind of where the similarities stop, though. And at the end of the day, I don't think I can quite call it a replacement to Ticket to Ride. If you get Ticket to Ride, this will definitely be a game that you can grasp, and I'd say they're probably about the same weight. And one of the biggest differences here is you're actually going to be moving on the board. So where you are geographically on the map matters as to what you can score. And you do have these really awesome, giant, chunky hiking meeple guys that are moving around the board. And all of the colored cards also have a number on them. And so the way you move is you discard cards and move that many spaces. So you have 4. You say, I'm going to move, take an action to move, so you play the 4, and then you move 4 spaces. You can also play a 4 and a 2 to move up to 6 spaces. You don't get any change, but you can move. So, you can move, if you have all of these cards, you can play a 4, a 2, a 3, a 2, and a 3 to move 6, 10, 14 spaces in one turn. And that's kind of where one of my biggest negatives in this game came from, is that especially in lower player counts, it kind of became a game where, like, I'm going to draw cards, you're going to draw cards, I'm going to draw cards, you're going to draw cards, I'm going to draw cards. Now I have the sequence that I want, so I'm going to move and score this. And so it wasn't like a bad thing. And honestly, my wife really enjoyed it because she's not a heavy gamer. It was really easy for her to grasp. She's played Ticket to Ride, and so she had a lot of fun with it. I did feel like it was a little bit of just like a race to see who could get the right sequence of cards in your hands, which is part of why some of these big abilities came into play, because there's one that lets you discard any 2 cards to replace one of the symbols of these cards. So if you need a green, a brown, and a blue, and you have a brown and a blue but no green, but you do have 2 yellow cards, you can discard those 2 yellow cards, and that will count as your green. So things like that can definitely give you an advantage in that racing to collect the cards. But because those abilities are available to everyone, if you get that advantage, I could very easily take it back away from you again. I did say that comes to play more in smaller player games because especially a 2-player game, you only have 3 parks out there, so it's very easy to say, okay, I'm closest to this park, we're both kind of going for that. Or I'm just collecting cards and if I can get there first, I'm gonna get it. In higher player games, because it's not just going back and forth, you may need to be a little bit more strategic about it. Or the gems may come into play a lot because again, in the 2-player game, like I kind of went for yellows and reds and she kind of went for blacks and greens. And so we weren't really competing much because once I had like 3 or 4 of one color and she didn't have any, she was like, well, why would I waste my time putting forth all that effort to try to catch up when I could just try to advance that much in a color that you don't have a lot of? In a higher level of game, 1, people are moving around a lot more, so there's going to be a lot more gems to get. 2, there's going to be a lot more parks available on the board, so not only do you have more options, but it's more likely that one of the other people at the board is also going for one of the parks that you're going for, so the race is going to be a little bit more of a component. The other big place where player interaction comes in is if at any point you land on a player, they are bumped back to start, which when you're kind of staying over here in the eastern seaboard, not that big a deal, everything's within like 3 or 4 spaces. But if you're trying to get up here into Alaska and like you spend all your cards to get all the way up here, and then like especially if there's a few parks over here or if you don't go quite far enough, and then somebody else lands on you, well now you go all the way back to start. And you might be thinking, like, oh, well then shouldn't I still do the thing where I just stay there and draw cards until I can get across the board? Well, 1, you may already be over here claiming a different park. 2, your opponents may be thinking, oh, well, I'm going to move a little slower but collect all these gemstones along the way. Or they may see you halfway across the board and then play cards not to go for a park, but just to knock you back to start to give them that leg up because they played 1 card that bumped you back that took away those 5 cards essentially that you just played. Overall, I did really enjoy this game. It's not going to be something that I'm specifically going to be like, hey, let's play Trekking the National Parks. It's one of my favorites just because I do prefer games that are a little heavier than this. But my wife loved it. She thought it was a game that she really wants to play, and she was actually inviting people over to play games with us because she wanted to play this in a bigger group. So if you are someone who likes that family weight game, or if you do have a family of kids who like to play games with you, I think this is a great addition to your collection, especially if you do like that Ticket to Ride. If that's a big game of yours and you want to have more like it, this is a great contender. The component quality is great. You've got these cool little plastic gems. Again, these big chunky wood meeples are A+. You've got a nice little bear first player marker. This leather bag I thought was a really cool touch. I was a little sad that you only use this in storage because part of setting up the game is to put all the gems in the map and then this bag is empty and you just toss it back in the box. So it's a great addition. It's a, it's not real leather, it's a pleather bag, but it like looks cool and it kind of fits the outdoorsy theme of the game, and it's just a nice little touch they have. All the parks have pictures of the actual parks on them, not like sketches or anything. It's actual pictures that were taken of those parks, so it kind of helps you, again, see that beauty of the United States of America. Geographically, the map is a little squished, so it's not like, I almost said anatomically correct. It's not like an exact picture of what you would see like on a globe or something, but it does kind of help you, learn where those parks are and go, oh, I had no idea that Lassen Volcano was just north of Yosemite National Park. We should go see that too. I've always wanted to see a volcano. So if all of that sounds like something that you want to add to your collection, I will have a purchase link to this game in the description box down below. Hey, while you're down there, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored.